This episode is brought to you by Generate Solutions, your go-to AI experts specializing in empowering commercial real estate companies and environmental consulting firms. As AI is quickly transforming industries and enhancing efficiency, it is important you don't let your business fall behind. At Generate Solutions, we streamline workflows and automate tasks by creating custom AI agents tailored specifically to your business needs. Interested in taking your operations to the next level with AI? Email mfiorante@generatesolutions.com or find us directly on LinkedIn by clicking the link in the bio. On to our episode.
Welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. Today is a special one for me because it brings me back to my youth and to something that I never thought was going to happen in the 70s. And when it did, it really changed my mindset in regards to, I'm going to say, the underdog. Because at the time when I was watching hockey, it was the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Montreal Canadiens, and of course the Boston Bruins were coming on. But in 1973-74, a team out of Philadelphia kind of shocked the world and changed the game there for a few years and set a standard there for, okay, don't take anybody for granted. Today I'm going to bring in a gentleman that wrote a book. And he wrote a book that is just fabulous. We're going to promote the book today. He has covered Philadelphia sports for more than 45 years. In addition to a 40-plus year tenure with the Philadelphia Inquirer, he has written for the Hockey News, Philly Hockey Now, Athlon Magazine, Baseball America, and the Scouting Report. He is the author of 6 books, including Miracle in the Making, The Adam Taliaferro Story, and If These Walls Could Talk, The Philadelphia Flyers with Lou Nolan. But the book we're going to talk about today and his career is this book. It's Bullies. And this book is, of course, the book with Sam Carchidi and our guest today, and of course with Jeff Hare. Sam has been gracious enough to come on our program, and we're going to talk about those Flyers of 1967 to now, and of course those 2 remarkable years, 73-74, and this man knows it no better. Sam, what is going on with you, young man? And tell me again something good.
How you doing, John? Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I had Jeff and I had a great time putting this book together, and it actually started as a TV series, and we can get into that later. But ended up as a book, and we're still hopeful that it'll end up being a TV series with a streaming service. But it's kind of a 50-year reflection. The players now looking back on what happened a little over 50 years ago now. And as you said, they shocked the hockey world. They beat the big bad Boston Bruins to win the cup, and then the next year they beat Buffalo to win their 2nd straight cup. And believe it or not, that 75 team is the last NHL team composed of all Canadian players to win the cup, because we had an influx of Europeans since then.
Sure.
And so the 75 team was the last team that was made up of all Canadians, and they're proud of that, and rightfully so. And yeah, we can get into that. And I'm also working on a book now on the late great Johnny Gaudreau and Matty Gaudreau, and who tragically lost their lives last year, actually almost 2 years ago now. And for those who watched the Olympics, those guys were in the hearts and the minds of all the U.S. Olympians, and as they stunned Canada to win the gold medal. And we could get into that a little bit too, but again, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, for sure. While you were talking about 74, 75, I'll have a question for you about 1976, because I ran it past Ginny Perrant, Bernie's wife, in an interview. I still thinking deep in my heart, if Bernie plays in those 4 games and Stevenson doesn't, it's a different story. But we'll get into that. It was just another series that I thought.
Rick McLeish was also out, who was the Flyers' best performer
Yes.
in the playoffs in both
Yeah.
74 and 75, and obviously not having Bernie there, and the Flyers may have won 3 in a row, but that 3-year period was their best period
Oh,
in
incredible. And
Philadelphia
if we
history.
remember that series, Sam, against Montreal, not that we wanted to jump ahead to that they were all 1-goal games that they lost in that
Yeah,
series. So
yeah.
incredible. McLeish is good for maybe 2 a night, and of course Bernie's good for 50 saves a night, So, and no, but how do you go back with this team? Of course, as the youth when they came into the expansion, of course, and then of course this team got better and better, and then of course there's something, and I think you reiterated in the book that they played St. Louis in a playoff series in '69. And I think Snyder had had enough, the owner, Mr. Snyder had had enough and says, hey, we're never again going to get beat up like we did in that St. Louis series. Do you
Yeah.
think the tide turns there, Sam?
I do, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's a very key part of their history. And I talked to some of its kids about this, and they said that the origination of the Broad Street Bullies, in their mind, actually started when their father, Ed Snyder, the Flyers owner, was a youngster growing up in Washington, D.C. His parents had a grocery store there, very successful, and Ed was bullied and the victim of a lot of anti-Semitism at that time, and got pushed around, both verbally and physically, and was a kind of a quiet, shy kid at that time. It did not fight back, did not push back,
Right.
and his uncle Sam, gave him a talking to and said, "You have to respond." And Ed did, and not that Ed became a bully, but he became a tough guy of sorts,
Sure. Sure.
and he fought back, and there was I don't want to call it a gang because that has a bad connotation, but he had a group of guys, that stood up for the
Sure.
Jewish people in that area, and Ed fought back and became a respected young kid. He's probably 10, 11 years old at the time, and but he remembered that was deep in his mind. And the
Sure.
St. Louis Blues, for those who don't know, really pushed the Flyers around in year one
Yes.
and in year two. And in year two, they swept the Flyers in 4 games. They won the playoff series handily. And not only that, they embarrassed the Flyers. They bullied them all over the ice. They're very physical. They had the Plager brothers,
Plager
Noel
brothers. Yeah.
Bard. Yeah, yeah, they were guys that push people around with their fists, and
Sure.
uh, and Ed said, "This is not going to happen to us again." Thinking back to his days growing up in D.C. and getting bullied, this is not going to happen to us again.
Yeah.
And he
And
instructed Keith Allen, the general manager, to go out and get bigger, tougher players, to draft bigger, tougher players. And he told them, I'm not looking for just guys that are goons. I want players that are talented, but big in size. And that draft, they drafted Don Selesky, Dave Schultz.
Big
The
Bird
next,
Selesky.
yeah, Big Bird, the Hammer. And then the next year to that, it was the Hound Dog, Bob Kelly, who was drafted. Now, I should preface this by saying the year they drafted Schultz and Selesky, they also drafted a kid named Bobby Clark, and that had a significant that made a significant difference too. I don't want,
But
yeah,
and nothing against a gentleman that I've interviewed, and of course I think this is a guy too that you probably like. Nothing against the one and only Andre Lacroix, who was a speedy center, but
terrific player,
yeah, terrific player. Went to the WHA, also set
star
records.
there, yep.
came to Chicago for a cup of coffee
Sure.
here one season. But yeah, now you're right, Sam. The style had changed. And basically, you saw a progression with the Flyers. And by 1972-73, they played Montreal in the semis of that
Yeah.
year. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute. How did the Flyers get this far and gave that Canadian team with those players you just mentioned? Okay, but the team was built around Clark, correct?
Clark and Bernie Perron, I would say,
Yeah,
both of them, no
yeah,
question about it. Yeah, yeah.
sure.
And they also had, I don't want people to think that the Flyers were goons back then. They really weren't. They were
No,
tough, physical guys,
no.
but they had three guys that made the Hall of Fame. You had Bill Barber, Bobby Clark, Bernie Perron. You had two guys who were borderline Hall of Famers and could still get in someday, Reggie Leach and Ricky McLeish. You
Sure.
had solid players, underrated players like Ross Lonsberry and Bill Flett, Oris Kindrachuk, Gary Dornhofer. I could go on and on. Bobby Kelly was a good player. I mean, he wasn't just a fighter. Schultz scored 20 goals the year they won their first cup. Selesky could score 15, 20, 25 goals. I mean, and their defense was outstanding. They didn't really have a number one like a Bobby Orr, somebody of that ilk, but who did. But they
They,
had guys,
they
I
had
think,
the Barry Ashbys and the Ed Van Imps of the world.
but yeah, they had four
Exactly.
guys that were solid number twos,
Sure.
Joe Watson, Jimmy Watson, you mentioned Ashby, Van Imp. I mean, Tom Bladen was great on the power play. They all knew their roles, and they had a lot of role players like Terry Crisp. I mentioned Oris Kindrachuk, Billy Clement. Uh, I don't think there's any team that understood their roles better than the Flyers, and they had the mastermind, Fred Shiro, as their coach. They had a mastermind in the front office in Keith Allen. They had a
Sure.
great owner. I mean, everything fell into place, and they became the youngest team, or I should say, the quickest to win a cup since they originated. They originated in 67, 68, won the cup in 74. So it took them 7 years, and that held up for over 40 years.
40
The
years.
quickest to win a cup since they were born, seven
Sure.
years. And the Vegas Golden Knights won it in their 6 year of existence. So it
Wow.
just shows you. And the Knights, like the Flyers, drafted so well. I mean, and a scout who doesn't get much publicity, Marcel Pelletier, the late great Marcel Pelletier.
Yes.
Yeah, he had a lot to do with the draft, and
Wow.
they drafted guys like Joe Watson, Gary Dornhofer. The number one pick, of course, was Bernie Perron. I mean, the number one overall pick they had in the draft was Bernie Perron, and
Correct.
who knew he would become the
Oh,
greatest goaltender in the Flyers history and one of the greatest goaltenders in NHL history. They also
in
drafted
NHL.
Ed Van Imp. I mean, it was a tremendous draft that they had, and four or five of those guys they drafted became core players uh, and were there when they won their first cup. So again, I don't think Marcel Pelletier, a scout, a super scout, gets the deserved credit because he was a big part in that too. So put it all together, them all knowing their roles, they had talent, they had size, they had
Yes.
physicalness, and it all produced two straight cups. And as you mentioned, maybe it would have produced three if Bernie Perrant and Rick McLeish were not injured, but it did produce the epic win over the Soviets that year in '76.
What a game. We'll talk about that for sure. What
Sure.
a game. And Mr. Van Imp's check on the Russian when the Russians left the ice. I'll never
Yeah,
forget
yeah.
that.
He
Yeah.
ran into my elbow, Ed said. He ran into my elbow. That's what happened. Call him up, just bumped into him.
That was a great check. But I have to tell you, just to talk about Bernie for a second, I'll never forget a video. So I know it was the series on ESPN. I think it was called the Broad Street Bullies. They had that ESPN show, and I'll never forget Billy Clement. He says we went to training camp that year in 1973. We felt it, but all of a sudden he says we got the new and improved Bernie.
Yeah. Yeah, they made the trade. They traded Doug Favell for him and
Yeah.
got back, and he was the difference. Also, I neglected to mention one other player, Andre Moose Dupont. They got in a
From the
trade,
New York
and
Rangers.
and he was, definitely one of the Broad Street
Oh
bullies.
yeah.
And it's funny when we did this book, I would say most of the players talked about Moose and his contributions because he was a good defenseman, solid
Oh,
defenseman,
solid.
cleared the ice in front of
Yeah.
the goalie and gave them toughness. And in a way, he was a missing piece. And he's another underrated guy, I think, from that team. And they made Keith Allen made a great trade for him, and he scored one of the biggest goals in history in Game 2 against Boston, Stanley Cup Final, game number 2, tied the
Yes.
game
Yes.
with about 50 seconds to go, and then
I
Bobby
still see
Clark.
him jumping up and down, Sam. I
Yeah,
can still number 6. Yeah.
the shuffle. There you go. And
Yeah.
then
The
Bobby
shuffle.
Clark
The
scored
shuffle.
scored in overtime,
Big goal.
probably the biggest goal in Flyers history. But
Oh yeah. Yeah.
that gave the Flyers a 1-1 tie in the series, and really made them believers that they could win the cup that year, and they did.
Well, there was a comment that came out of, I'll never forget game 1 because the score was tied and Orr hit that slap shot with under 2 minutes left in Boston Garden that Bernie missed. And Bernie, of course, Bernie, the charismatic Bernie, I've learned more about Bernie through Ginny and of course through you. But Bernie says, I guess he turned to Bobby Clark and says, if that's all Orr's got, we got this series. I mean, that was something. That's ice water in your veins.
Well, the funny thing is, in that series, Fred Shearer, the Flyers coach, instructed the Flyers that whenever they dumped it in, dump it to Orr's side, make him chase it, get him tired, and it worked. I mean, who would
Yeah.
have thought you'd want to give Orr the puck? They wanted to wear him out, wear him down. They wanted to dump
Yes.
it in, check him, be physical with him, and they did. And Orr was not the big factor that he has been. And to me, he's arguably the greatest player of all time just because of the way he revolutionized the game. But, in that series, they kind of equalized him, and that was a big factor. And props to Fred Shearer for that.
Yeah, for sure. That was amazing and a great technique by Shiro. Even like in the Russian series with that one game, it's just a phenomenal situation with that too, where he was able to, he attacked the Russians. He attacked the Russians in a way like, okay, we're going to be physical. Let's see what they got. And he went after their style. What makes you write this great book? What got you? Because this is fantastic that you were able to, do this about bullies. What made you holding up the book here that Sam has written? What finally progresses you, and how long did it take you to write this book? As well, I want to talk about 73, 74 first here.
Yeah, I guess it took us probably over a year, and I did most of the book, and Jeff Hare, my partner, did most of the screenwriting. As I said, it didn't start out as a book; it started out as a TV series. Jeff Hare is a producer and director, and does a lot of work for Lifetime, and we were working on another project, and he's out in L.A., out in Hollywood, but he's from Roxborough, which is a Philadelphia suburb, and he was a 9-year-old kid when the Flyers won the Cup. And
Oh
Jeff, I
wow!
think, is about 60 now, and he said, "If we could ever do a project, I would love to do one on the Broad Street Bullies." And we got talking about it, and we decided we're going to try to write, a TV series and try to sell it to Netflix or Amazon or one of the streaming
Sure.
services. So what we did is we interviewed basically, I'd say 95% of the players from that team. We interviewed people connected to the team, from broadcaster Gene Hart to, broadcaster Gene Hart's daughter, Lauren Hart. Gene, of course, has passed
Just passed
away.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, his wife, Sarah, to Lou Nolan, to Ed Snyder has passed. So we interviewed several of his grown kids, and on and on. And we had over 1,000 pages of transcripts from all these interviews. I can't say enough about the players. They really gave us their time, and we're very happy to talk about it. And with the idea it would be a scripted series. Now, this is not a documentary. HBO did a great documentary probably about 15 years ago. This would be a scripted series, meaning there would be actors and actresses playing, all the players, the owner, the front office people, anybody connected with the team. And as we were doing it, we had so much material and we learned so many new things. Like I told you about Ed Snyder being bullied as a youngster,
Yes.
and Dave Schultz really opened up to us. Sadly, he was molested when he was 12 years old and
Yes.
never told anyone. And I asked Dave, it was a tough question to ask, but I asked him, I said, I said, I'm not a psychiatrist, but do you think all these years that when you were fighting people, you were imagining the person that molested you? And he said, no, 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 that only happened a few times and had nothing to do with it. But, unfortunately, it had to be a question that had to be asked. But we uncovered a lot of different things about what made that team tick and behind the scenes stories from the wives and really some fascinating things that we said this is enough for a book.
Right.
and and
Fantastic.
Triumph, yeah, so Triumph out of Chicago, published the book, and we're very grateful to them, and we're still shopping it. We have meetings probably once a month with TV production studios trying to make this a series. We have an outline, we have a trailer, we have a couple episodes written, we have an outline for 16 episodes, and we came close with Sylvester Stallone's company. He, of course, is from Philadelphia and knows the story, and his company, Balboa Productions.
Okay.
We were negotiating with them for 6 weeks, and the bottom line is they passed on it. Didn't think it had enough international appeal, which we disagree with, but because you know part of it includes the Russian game, and hockey has a great appeal in Europe. So, but that's a story for another day. So anyway, we're still, bottom line is about once a month we meet with production studios, and we're hopeful of selling this as a TV series because it was such a colorful team. It's just a good
Yes.
thing. Cell phones weren't around then because some of the things that happened, they would not want being spread on photos
Sam,
around the
I
internet.
remember even on the ESPN thing, which you're going to remember very well, they always talked about that famous bar that burned down, Rexy's in
Yeah,
Philadelphia.
yeah. In fact, we have a whole chapter on Rexy's.
Rexy, yeah. So we can imagine what happened at Rexy's that we don't want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we
no,
have some things in there about Rexy's that'll make people laugh, I think. But yeah,
fantastic.
Rexy's was built back up, but when it did catch on fire, that was the Flyers hangout. The players went to practice that the next
Yes,
day and all
yes,
wore
yes. They
black
went.
armbands
Wow.
on their jerseys
Right.
in memorial as a memorial to their watering hole Rexy's. But they were great. They were regular guys, would sit at the bar, exchange
Yeah.
stories with the people. They were not prima donnas by any sense. They were the
Wasn't an
opposite. They were the
arrogance. There
everyday
wasn't an
men.
arrogance about this team. There, that era, you could see them on the street, and yeah, exactly. Fantastic. That 73-74 season, I'll never forget it. I was, I think, in eighth grade, and of course, the Blackhawks had lost to Boston in 6 games, and then the Flyers beat the New York Rangers in Game 7, and I'll never forget when Schultz and Dale Rolfe went at it. And Dale Rolfe, I still think he's in the old Philadelphia Spectrum laying down. It was just, that's when you knew, and I mean, not that I want to bypass the whole season, but that's when you knew, hey, this series coming up with Boston is not going to be a cakewalk for the Boston Bruins. Do you remember them going into that playoff run? Was it Atlanta, New York, and then, of course, the Boston Bruins for the Stanley Cup?
Yeah, they beat Atlanta. Dave Schultz actually scored the overtime goal
Yes.
in Game 4. They swept the then Atlanta Flames. Uh, Fred Shearer, their coach, got into an altercation after Game 3 in a bar. Apparently, he was
Yeah.
honoring the Flyers Some fans were apparently heckling him about the Flyers, and he stood up to them, and apparently he got jumped and beat up. They had to send him home. Mike Nicolak, the assistant coach, coached Game 4. Dave Schultz scores the overtime winner. Flyers are behind. I believe it was 3-0 that game. Came back, won it on Schultz overtime winner. Then they beat the Rangers. The Flyers to this day call that their Stanley Cup in a way, because they said that series was tougher than the Boston series, believe it or not. But Dale Rolfe uh, and Schultz got into it. Rolfe had bumped into Kindrachuk of the Flyers, and Schultz went over to defend Kindrachuk, and
Yeah.
Rolfe, took a couple swings, and then Schultz knocked him down to the ice and pounded him, and none of the Rangers came to his rescue. A lot of
Nobody
people have
came to
said
the.
that sent a message that they weren't really a team that wanted the cup as much as the Flyers.
The Flyers.
And Park, after the game, Brad Park said that if that's what you have to do to win a cup, I want no parts of it. And the Flyers were offended by that. Like,
Yeah.
well, okay, skate away then.
Let's
And,
get away.
we
Exactly.
will defend all our players. And that kind of became a rallying cry for them, that we stand up for each other over here.
Sure.
And then, of course, they went into Boston and
Yeah.
lost tough game 1, as you mentioned, but Clark's heroics in game 2 and Moose Dupont. And then they won on a late Bill Barber goal in game 3 and won game 4, lost game 5, came back in game 6, a 1-0 thriller. Rick McLeish tipped in Dupont's shot. Jill
Yes.
Gibert was terrific for Boston in goal, and Bernie Perrant was even better. And lo and behold, the Flyers had a
Win that.
championship. And I should mention, John, that time, Philadelphia was known as the city of losers. The
Yes.
76ers were coming off a 9-73 season. The Eagles and Phillies were perpetually in last place. Philly needed a winner in the worst way, and the Flyers brought it. And from that point on, it seems like the other Philadelphia sports teams took their key from the Flyers, and they advanced. They made moves to better the team, and by 1980, all 4 Philly teams were in the respective championship
Yes. Yes. The Phillies, the Eagles, the Flyers. Exactly. They were
and the
all in the.
Sixers. Yep.
Uh, Going back to that game 6 in Philadelphia when McLeish scores early on the tip on Gilbert. I brought this up in the interview the other day I interviewed Ben Wilson, of course, and I interviewed Ginny. The shot by Ken Hodge, if you remember it was a howitzer, and I call it an Iran missile that was coming toward Bernie, and he made a leg save that, people say to me, well, why is this leg save that you talk about all the time so important? This man shot a puck, Ken Hodge, as hard as Bobby Hull. And Perrant stuck out his leg. And it was miraculous, the save, because he scores that. That game, Boston outshot them and should have won that game 5-1. But Perrant stood on his head. He was on another planet, Bernie, that day.
Yeah, Bernie was terrific. I think that shot came with about 50 seconds to go.
Oh,
The
God.
Flyers clinging to a 1-0 lead, and and he was amazing not only then but in the entire series, and one of the few goalies. I'm not sure. I never looked this up, but he may be. I don't know if he's the only player to ever win back-to-back clinching games in a Stanley Cup final with shutouts. So he did it in 74 with a 1-0 shutout, did it in 75 with a 2-0 shutout over Buffalo. And I'm going
Yes.
to have to look that up. And
I think you're correct. I don't remember, of course, shutting them out. And then, of course, he's the Conn Smythe winner 2 years in a row,
right,
too, correct? Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And Reggie Leach was the winner in 76, even though the Flyers lost to Montreal, but Leach was on fire
Oh,
in
yeah, he had Dryden's
76.
number in that series. He had Ken Dryden's number in that series. I have to tell you, a guy that we didn't mention, Sam, just talking here, and I think I saw him at a card show once. I could be wrong. Bobby Taylor, who was Bernie's backup then, Bobby
Oh, yeah.
Taylor. But a fun-loving man who, and I thought him and Bernie were a great combo. I mean, Taylor, of course, is not going to see many games with, Bernard Marcel.
Yeah, yeah. And Fred Shero, I'm almost positive it was Bobby Taylor, but Bernie had played like for 2.5 straight months, and and Freddie decided to start Taylor one game, and they said, "Why did you decide to start Taylor?" The reporters asked him before the game, "Why are you having Bobby Taylor in that?" He says, "Well, it was his turn." So, you know, so I guess after being on the bench for 2.5, 3 months, it was his turn. But yeah, Freddie was a beaut, and but Taylor, was a solid goalie and a
Solid
great
goaltender
guy
for
in the
sure.
clubhouse, great team leader, and he told us lots of stories too. He's in the book
Oh
a
yeah,
lot.
great
Great
guy.
guy, and of course he became a great broadcaster for the Flyers and then Tampa Bay, and I think he still does some work part time now for
Yeah.
Tampa Bay. But
A true gentleman, a true gentleman. Going in, of course, just great stuff here in the book again, Bullies. By the way, I want to just try to stop this here. Now, I should have stopped it about 50 minutes ago just to tell our audience we are visiting today with Sam Carchidi, the author of the book Bullies, Catching Up with the Hound, the Hammer, and the Stanley Cup Champion Philadelphia Flyers. This is the book. And Sam, of course, on our thing today. Just great stuff in the book, what we're kind of breaking down and everything else. I'm going to ask you as the author, Sam, going into 74, 75 now, do you think as that teenager back then, they're going to do it again in Philadelphia? Did you have a good feel?
yeah, I think I did at 74, 75 because that year they added Reggie Leach and Leach and
Yes.
Bobby Clark. The first year they had Bill Flett. The second year they added Reggie Leach, and he and Clark had a long history together. They played in Flin Flon and
Juniors.
junior, and
Yeah.
he was like an added scorer. Flett was on the downslide, and when they added Reggie, and they also had Ted Harris, a veteran defenseman that year, and yeah, and they had the confidence, and they also had motivation. They had the confidence from winning the cup, but they had motivation because everybody around the league said it was just a fluke, and they wanted to prove everybody wrong, and they did.
Yes.
So, John, can we take a break for 1 second?
Let's take that break.
Does that mess you up?
No, 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 it does not. It
Okay,
does
I'll
not.
be right back.
You
I just got
got
to
it.
get
Let's
this.
take that break. Yeah.
Thank you.
Fine here. So going back to 74, 75, yeah, you're right. You added the correct pieces, meaning like a Leach, because Flett and guys like, say, even Simon Nole, they were kind of on the down of their career. I mean, they weren't the same players, but yeah, I thought that was definitely a stronger team going into that series. But again, the dominance, and of course, not to keep saying, the lines that they had, with Barber, McLeish, Clark. Now you got a Reggie Leach. Your defense is even better than ever. Did they have Bladen that year?
Tom Bladen, yeah. Tom was great at the point on the power play, and yeah, an important piece. Like I said, he knew his role. They all knew their roles. I mean, Terry Chris was a big addition to the team because
Exactly.
he helped with their penalty killing, and their penalty killing was the best in the league, and they had to be because they were always leading the league in penalty
In
minutes. So guys like
penalties.
Terry Crisp and Billy Clement were really in
Oh,
Kinderchuck and Clark. I mean, they were expert. Billy Barber, they were expert penalty killers. They needed to be, and of course they had Bernie Perrant, who was the
yeah,
best penalty killer. If you got behind those guys, you had Bernie to
yeah.
back them up. And it all comes down to goaltending. And I think that's why this year was very good for them because they had Dan Vladar, who had a terrific
Yes.
season.
Speaking of them, yeah, this
And
year I thought they were going to really go all the way almost to the, where Vegas and Carolina are right now. Um, do you remember the whole Buffalo series? Because that was a
what
interesting
series? I'm
thing.
sorry.
Were you? Do you remember the Buffalo series?
Oh, sure. I
Yeah,
mean,
that
the
was a
funny
six
thing is,
gamer. That was a six gamer.
yeah, and they had a 2-game nothing lead. They went to Buffalo, and for those that don't know, it was so hot outside in Buffalo
Fog.
that the ice, you had from the condensation, you had fog, you couldn't even see. And Bernie gave up the winning goal, I believe, it was in overtime. he lost it in the fog. He never
Yeah,
saw
yeah.
it.
It was from
Yeah.
Rene Robert. I never, even on the television, you couldn't see the puck on the television screen. Robert scored on him on overtime. And then I remember Buffalo had a goalie named Jerry Desjardins who fell apart. And they went with the veteran Crozier in games 5 and 6. And game 6 was a fantastic game. Again,
Well,
Bernie,
that was a 0-0 game,
yes.
and you don't want to have a game seven because anything can happen in a game seven, even though it would have been back in Philadelphia. So in game six, it's 0-0 going into the third period, and Mike Nicoluk, who was the Flyers assistant coach, very first assistant coach in the NHL, and he went to Fred Shero and said, we're not getting enough offense right now. Obviously, maybe we'd shake it up and put Hound out there to start the period. And Hound was Bob Kelly. So we
Yes.
put Bob Kelly on the top line for that first shift, with Leach and Clark. Took Barber off the line and just to shake things up. And lo and behold, Kelly, for those who don't know, was like a pinball out there. He was, I always called him the Pete Rose of hockey because of how he hustled all the time. He would bang into somebody and then bounce off them and hit
I,
somebody else. He was a human pinball, and he hit Jerry Korab behind the net, and then Clark shielded him off. The puck came out front, and Bob Kelly, of all people, who was a fourth liner, scores the goal in the opening minute of the third period to give the Flyers a 1-0 lead. And that stood up Bill Clement after taking a great pass from Morris Kindrachuk, who got crushed after he delivered the pass, scored on a semi breakaway in the last minute and a half, 2 minutes to make it 2-0. But Kelly's goal actually stood up,
yeah,
and the
yeah.
Flyers won it 2-0. And Bernie had another shutout, but it was a great series. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Buffalo had the French Connection line,
Yeah.
and they were a terrific team.
Yeah, because Buffalo, like you said, the French Connection with Gilbert Perrault, Rene Robert, and Richard Martin. And of course, like they had Korab, they had Schoenfield, they had Rick Dudley. And of course, they bring in this veteran goalie, Crozier, who really played a solid game in that game 6. Nobody thought this older goalie was going to even, they were going to, maybe the Flyers were going to bubble him and the Sabres out of the arena. When did the book come out, Sam? When did this book come out, Bullies?
That book came out in October, so yeah, about 7, 8 months ago, I guess. And yeah, we've had some good success. And interestingly, I've done some signings with some of the
Yeah.
guys from that team. I did one with Bob Kelly, who's the greatest guy in the world. We did it at Carl's Cards in Havertown. I did one with Dave Schultz at
Yes.
Rexy's Bar, their hangout, and Dave drew a big crowd, as did Bob Kelly. I did one with Jenny Prunt. Sadly, Bernie, I talked to Bernie about 30 hours before he passed, and I said to him, I said, the Flyers have been nice enough to ask me to do a book signing at Xfinity Mobile Arena. And I said, they don't want to see me. They want to see you, talk to you. Would you mind sitting with me? And Bernie's answer was, whatever you need, talk to
Whatever you
Jim
need.
Schultz. That was Bernie. I mean,
Yeah,
just
incredible.
I can't say enough about. He would send me texts on Father's Day and say, "Hey, just thinking of you. Hope you have a good Father's Day." This was the kind of person Bernie was. He was just, he would make soup in his soup kitchen for underprivileged. He would dress up
Yeah,
as
he was
Santa Claus.
something. Yeah.
Just a beautiful, beautiful person. And but anyway, I got sidetracked. But yeah, we've done lots of songs. In fact, I'm doing one for Father's Day with
Okay.
Lauren Hart at Carl's Cards.
Gene's daughter, right? Gene's daughter.
Daughter
Yeah.
who now sings the national anthem. We're doing one at Carl's Cards in Havertown the day before
Very
Father's.
nice. Yeah.
So and she
Just
did great.
fantastic. And again, a shout out, speaking about the Perrants, shout out to Ginny, Perrant. If it's not for Ginny, I don't meet Sam Carchidi here today and have this
Ginny is
great,
the best.
gracious woman
She
who
is a
just really
tremendous
goes out of her
person.
way in everything she does.
And yeah, Bernie lit up when he was with Ginny, and he was always
Oh,
with Ginny,
yeah.
and yeah, they're just great people who are made for each other, and
Yeah, very nice. Very
it's
nice.
just hard to believe that Bernie's not here. I
I
miss
know.
him every
Just
day. We all do, and it's he seemed like the indestructible person. He was just so
Sure.
full of life, so happy, always giving, always
Incredible.
doing for others. And you forgot almost that he was the greatest goalie in Flyers
Oh,
history, and like I
incredible.
said, one of the best in NHL history.
Yeah, the pieces to the puzzle fit. Okay, I'm going to do a thing of 5 questions. I love the fact that you came on here and we get this tidbit of the book, and I want our audience to know that please purchase the book. The book is fantastic. It's the era of hockey that is, for me, long gone, in the sense of when you knew the players, you knew who was going to be the playoff matchup. I can't even remember some eras of who won the Stanley Cup, but I'll never forget that era because, of course, my Chicago Blackhawks were always in the thick of things, but they weren't the Philadelphia Flyers of that
And
time.
I think one thing that helped that era was the fact that the players were more identifiable because they didn't wear helmets. And thank God they do wear helmets today,
Yes.
and it saves them from injuries. But with the Blackhawks, you knew Stan Mikita, Pitt Martin,
Oh,
they wore helmets. With the Flyers, it was Kindrachuk and Dupont, Lonsberry. There were so few players that wore helmets
yeah.
that you remembered the players that did wear helmets, and
Sure.
um, so
Good
I,
point
I
by you.
think
Good
that
point by
brought the
you.
players closer because you could see their face, you could see their hair flowing, and I think in a way
Exactly.
that helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got 5 questions for you, and then I'm going to say something about you at the end from a gentleman that we just touched on a little bit today, but it's going to be in regards to you. But I got 5 for you.
Okay.
This is fantastic. I know you've written some books. As I opened up this thing today, I know you've been part of 6 books. But who are your early mentors, Sam, that got you to be to the point of your life of what you've done? Because this is fantastic work. Just a couple of mentors that you still think about that you want to mention here on the program.
Yeah, I think Bill Lyon, who was a great columnist with the Philadelphia Inquirer, and uh, he always wrote about the humility of the athletes, and I just enjoyed him so much. I think you kind of take a little bit of each writer that you really like Stan Hochman of the Philadelphia Daily News. I loved reading
Very nice.
his. He wrote whimsically and with a lot of fun and a lot of spirit.
Sure.
Uh, Bill Lyon did as well, and I had the good fortune to work with both of them years later.
Sure.
And Bill, I remember my first book I was doing was with Adam Talaferro, the football player from Penn State, who overcame paralysis, and I did the book with Scotty Brown, who also worked at the Inquirer back then, and I got some advice from Bill, and Bill had written several books, and he says, you know what? You'll always feel proud. He says, do it. You'll always feel proud. Because I was asking the ins and outs,
The
and it's
ins and outs.
something you
Sure.
could, yeah.
That's
And
really neat. And thank
6
you for
books
bringing.
later, yeah,
Sure.
I really appreciated Bill's input and his time, and he was a guy that never big timed anybody. He was
Yeah.
always in your
Ex-
corner, and I try to pass that forward to younger writers now.
Exactly. Um, so our audience gets to know you just a little better. What's a Sam Carchida movie? Give me 2 movies they can watch 200 times over and over again and not get bored.
Oh
Give me
wow.
2. Give me 2 that you love.
It's a Wonderful Life is my number one.
Okay.
The Big Chill I loved. Kind of a totally different movie than that. But I can watch Rocky all the time. Of course, that's a Philly movie, but
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
Mr. Stallone, Mr. Rocky Balboa.
yeah. But I would say it's a Wonderful Life. I probably have watched it 500 times, but that's my all-time favorite.
And Sammy, we haven't been a part of 500 Christmases, but I'm with you on that one. Yeah. Um, all right, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Sure.
You're coaching the team. It's game 7. Flyers history. And the big guy upstairs calls down Sam Carchida and says, Sammy, starting with a goalie, give me the 5 in front of that goalie. Who are your 6 players? Your
Well,
all-time Flyers. Your all-time Flyers.
that's kind of easy because it's
Okay.
easy because I would probably have the 70, well, part of the 74 champion and part of the 75 because Reggie Leach was not on the 74.
Okay.
My three players would be Bill Barber, Bobby Clark, and Reggie Leach. My
Okay.
goalie would be Bernie Perrant. My defense, my yeah, there's no surprise. My defenseman would probably be Barry Ashby would be one,
Wow.
and all time. Boy, that's tough.
Yeah, one more
But you know
left,
what?
Sam.
I'll change it up a little bit. I'll probably go with Barry Ashby, and I'll have Chris Pronger as a guy because he could really run the power play
Yeah,
too,
he could.
and he would really fit on that team. So I would probably have Barry Ashby and Chris Pronger. I would go with, and there were some other guys
Yeah,
like
of course.
Claude
Yeah.
Giroux, and it would probably be on the second or third line, but that would be my top line, and I think
Sam,
we'd
I
win a
like
lot of
that
games.
one.
Even a bad coach like me would win a lot of games.
No, you wouldn't know. Sam, I like that Barry Ashby Pronger thing because Pronger's like a quarterback and Barry Ashby was old school. So I like that one a lot. I like that one a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
All right. 1967 to 2026. And you're well respected in the city of Philadelphia as I opened up this thing today for all that you've done. You got to give me one Flyer moment that sticks in your mind still to this day. That one Flyer moment that you're driving in the car or you're at home and you say, man, I remember that game like yesterday, or I remember that goal, or I remember that save. What's that moment that still runs through you?
Yeah, I think it's the final seconds of the Flyers' first cup, and it has to do with Gene Hart. And he kind of entrenched it in my mind because in the final seconds, he was talking in the present tense, and then in the past, because he says, with about 3 seconds ago, ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers have won the
The
Stanley Cup.
Stanley Cup.
And that gives me chills just to this
Yeah,
day.
you
And
just gave me
Joe Watson had the puck behind the net,
yeah.
and yeah, I guess that is the moment. And but yeah, there's so many on the ice. I mean, Bobby Clark's goal in Boston, which I mentioned earlier,
Oh,
that
the
that
backhander on Gilbert when he picked up the rebound again.
the
Yeah,
rebound exactly, and he jumped in the
incredible,
air, and
incredible. Ooh,
that to me, as far as a goal, um,
that was
that to me is
fantastic.
the greatest goal in history. I mean, you can argue that McLeish's goal to win the cup was bigger, but I think that set the tone. So if I had to pick a moment, it would be Gene Hart's announcing. And if
Okay.
something on the ice, it would be Bobby Clark after that goal jumping in the air because, like I said, that made the
Oh my
Flyers
God.
believers.
Without a doubt. Yeah, that motivational now. Hey, we got this. This series is tied one game apiece. We're going back to Philly. Right, exactly. Incredible. All right. You've done a lot, my friend. And it's really a pleasure to meet you. And of course, I'm going to ask you a question at the end, but then there's something I want to say about you. But you've done a lot of things here. I mean, this is a fantastic resume. Love the fact of the book. Thank you for being on my show today. But after
Thank
all
you.
the years doing this and all the things that you've done, like I said, as I opened it up today with the hockey news, Philly hockey now, baseball, everything else, is Sam Carchidi doing this all over the same way if he had to do it all over again?
Yeah, good question. I've never been asked that, but probably would. I mean, I'm fortunate because when I was a young kid, I was probably 8 or 9 years old. My best
Yep.
friend Tommy Carty, his dad, uh, was the Phillies baseball writer for the Courier Post, and he would take me and his son to old Connie Mack Stadium. We'd sit in the press box. We're 8, 9 years old, and
Wow.
we'd sit in the press box, and I'd watch all the other writers, and I love baseball, but I still do. And I'm looking at these guys and I'm thinking, these guys get paid to watch a game. They had free ice cream, free soda, free
Hot dogs.
popcorn, and they get paid. And it kind of planted a seed. At
See,
that time, I thought I was going to be a pro baseball player. That didn't work out too well.
right, right,
Barely
right.
made my high school team, but and I owe a lot to Mr. Carty, Jack Carty, and
Wow.
I decided, years later to go into journalism, but that planted a seed. I'm always thankful for that. So, and I've loved every day is different. I'm fortunate because it's not, some people like 9 to 5 jobs. They like the stability. I'd like to do something different every day. So, and I've been fortunate. I love writing stories about my family, about my kids were growing up, or now my
Sure.
grandkids, and I fortunate I'm able to still write about them in some
Yeah.
outlets, magazines and stuff, and
Fantastic.
so I'm fortunate. So I don't think I would do anything different. Sometimes I say if I had to do it over, I might become an agent because I think I would have been good at that. Because um, I've always had compassion for the players,
Right.
and I've always enjoyed working with numbers, and but I have no complaints. I'm very happy with what
Yeah.
I did, and hopefully
Well,
some people got some enjoyment out of it. I hope.
yeah. Well, it shows. All right. I'm going to reference a line, and it's going to be really about you here in these 45 minutes that we've talked today. Of course, we touched on Mr. Fred Shero today. We touched on him, a great coach, the right guy at the right time, I think, too, when Shero came there. There were two things. I interviewed Dave Schultz, and Dave Schultz said to me, I go, Dave, what's your favorite Fred Shero line? Your coach of those 2 Stanley Cups. He says, John, he said, to avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing in life if you want to avoid criticism from people. But this one pertains to you, what Mr. Shero said. Win together today, and we'll walk together forever. Sam Carchidi, I thank you so much for this because you've been walking and winning forever for your whole life. And this has been great. And I appreciate you coming on a conversation with John Conenna.
Oh, thank you, John. That was a beautiful ending. I love that. And Freddie was one of a kind, and these players are still walking together. They're still very close. They still do things together. Their alumni organization is led by Brad Marsh, is so strong. They do a lot of things in the community, and it's
Yes.
beautiful to see.
Yes.
But I can't thank you enough for having me.
Oh, this has been great. And listen, you got to make me a promise because I know we just touched on the surf of this, but because I could talk to you for 3, 4 hours, a guy from Chicago that loves hockey. But will you come back for a part 2?
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to.
Okay, great,
Hopefully,
great.
hopefully this book becomes a TV series, and we can talk about the TV series.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully I can come out to Philly one day to meet all you guys because, like I says, Ginny Perron has been gracious to get me some interviews like yourself and Ben Wilson and, of course, her. I mean, just this is fantastic. It's hard enough to get interviews in Chicago, and she's made it look so easy for me. But, of course, getting somebody like you, a class act, I appreciate it.
I appreciate your time, John.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a great day. This will go out on YouTube and Spotify. Our interview today with Sam Carchidi and his book, Bullies. Good day, everyone.